They said it was impossible. A girl who had never spoken a word in her 17 years of life stepped onto that stage, opened her mouth, and delivered the most breathtaking performance anyone had ever witnessed. The entire auditorium fell silent, then erupted into tears. But how Emma Rodriguez discovered her voice will shock you to your core. Emma was born different. While other babies cried and babbled, Emma was silent. Not by choice, but because something deep inside her brain refused to let the words escape. Her parents, Maria and David Rodriguez from Portland, Oregon, spent thousands of dollars on specialist therapists and treatments. Nothing worked. Imagine living in a world where you have thoughts, emotions, dreams, but no voice to express them. Emma carried a worn leather notebook everywhere, scribbling responses to questions, pointing at objects, developing an intricate sign language that only her family understood. Her younger brother Jake became her unofficial translator, finishing her silent sentences with the intuition only siblings possess. School was torture. Picture sitting in Mrs. Henderson's third-grade classroom, knowing every answer but unable to speak. 30 pairs of eyes staring at you, waiting for words that will never come. The other kids whisper behind her back. Some called her weird. Others just ignored her completely, as if she didn't exist. But Emma had a secret passion that burned inside her like fire. Music. Every night, she'd lock herself in her bedroom, put on her headphones, and lose herself in the voices of Adele, Whitney Houston, and Taylor Swift. She'd mouth every word perfectly, her body swaying to rhythms that seemed to flow through her soul. Her parents would peek through her door and see their daughter conducting invisible orchestras, her silent performances more passionate than anything Broadway had ever seen. Her mother Maria once said to a friend, "It's heartbreaking. I can see an entire symphony trapped inside my daughter, desperate to break free. Sometimes I catch her looking in the mirror, opening her mouth wide, as if she's screaming at the top of her lungs. But there's nothing, just silence." High school wasn't much better. Emma found refuge as the stage manager for Lincoln High's drama club. She couldn't perform, but she could make sure everyone else shined. She organized costumes, coordinated lighting, managed props with the precision of a Swiss watch. The actors loved her because she anticipated their needs before they even knew what they needed. March 15th, 2023. The spring musical was Les Miserables, and Emma was in her element backstage. The final dress rehearsal was in full swing when disaster struck without warning. A massive spotlight rig, poorly installed by the previous crew, began to shake violently during the climactic scene. Sparks flew like fireworks. Metal groaned under impossible stress. Then, in horrifying slow motion, 200 pounds of steel and glass broke free from the ceiling, plummeting directly towards Sarah Chen, the lead actress, who stood frozen center stage. Emma saw everything. Time seemed to stop. Sarah was going to die, and Emma was the only person close enough to do something about it. Without a second thought, Emma sprinted from the wings and threw her entire body into Sarah, shoving her clear of the impact zone. The equipment crashed exactly where Sarah had been standing, but Emma wasn't fast enough to save herself. The impact was devastating. Emma's head struck the stage floor with a sickening crack that echoed through the silent auditorium. She lay motionless in a growing pool of blood while paramedics rushed to the scene. 3 days. That's how long Emma remained unconscious in Portland General Hospital. Her parents never left her side, holding her hands, whispering prayers, begging her to wake up. The doctors delivered mixed news. She had a severe concussion, 2 broken ribs, but she would survive. However, there was something unusual. The impact had caused a small hemorrhage in her brain, specifically in the areas that control speech and vocalization. When Emma finally opened her eyes, her first instinct was to reach for her notebook. Her mother handed it to her, with tears streaming down her face. Emma scribbled a single question. "Is Sarah okay?" The answer was yes. Sarah was completely unharmed. But Emma's heroic act had cost her something precious. The doctors explained that the brain injury might have damaged whatever remaining speech capacity she had. She might never even be able to mouth words silently again. Emma nodded stoically, as if she'd expected this outcome her entire life. She'd traded her dream of someday finding her voice to save another person's life. It seemed like a fair exchange. 2 weeks later, Emma returned to school. The entire student body treated her like a hero. Sarah Chun had started a campaign to raise money for Emma's medical bills. The drama club had dedicated their opening night performance to her courage. But Emma just wanted things to return to normal. The night of the Les Miserables opening performance, Emma sat in the lighting booth, managing the technical aspects while fighting back tears. This was supposed to be her favorite musical. The song spoke to her soul in ways she couldn't explain. As the first act reached its emotional peak with "I Dreamed a Dream," Emma felt something strange happening in her chest. It started as a tingling sensation, like electricity running through her ribcage. Then it became pressure, as if something was pushing against her lungs from the inside. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the light cues, but the feeling grew stronger. During intermission, the pressure became unbearable. Emma rushed to the empty choir room, gasping for air. She felt like she was drowning, but instead of water, it was music flooding her lungs. She opened her mouth to breathe, and then it happened. The most beautiful note anyone had ever heard floated out of Emma Rodriguez's lips. Not words, not speech. Pure, crystalline music. She gasped in shock, covering her mouth with both hands. Had that sound really come from her? Tentatively, she opened her mouth again. This time, she heard the opening melody of "I Dreamed a Dream" flowing from her throat like liquid gold. Her voice was untrained but naturally perfect, hitting notes that would make professional singers weep with envy. Emma collapsed to her knees, sobbing with joy and confusion. After 17 years of silence, she had found her voice, not for speaking, but for something far more powerful. She could sing. The discovery was intoxicating. Emma spent the next 3 weeks secretly practicing in empty classrooms, abandoned hallways, anywhere she could be alone. She realized she could sing any song she'd ever heard, as if her years of silent listening had been preparing her vocal cords for this moment. But she told no one. How could she explain it? How do you tell people that a brain injury designed to steal your voice had actually given you something miraculous? The answer came during the drama club's end-of-year talent show. It was supposed to be a small, casual event for students and families. Emma was, as usual, managing the technical aspects from behind the scenes. The show was going perfectly until disaster struck again. This time, it wasn't equipment failure. It was human failure. Tyler Morrison, a senior who was supposed to perform the closing number, came down with severe food poisoning 30 minutes before his performance. There was no backup plan. The show would end on a disappointing note. Sarah Chun found Emma adjusting microphone levels and grabbed her shoulders. "Emma, I know this sounds crazy, but we need someone to fill Tyler's slot. I know you can't speak, but could you, I don't know, do some kind of interpretive dance or something? Please? You saved my life. This show means everything to our seniors." Emma stared at Sarah for a long moment. The auditorium was full of students, parents, teachers. Everyone who had ever known her as the silent girl. Everyone who had ever whispered behind her back or looked at her with pity. She could play it safe. She could decline politely and let the show end quietly. Or she could do something that would change her life forever. Emma walked to Sarah's purse, pulled out a lipstick, and wrote on her hand, "Trust me." 5 minutes later, Emma Rodriguez walked onto the Lincoln High School auditorium stage for the first time in her life. The crowd fell silent, confused about why the mute stage manager was standing center stage with a microphone. Emma looked out at 300 faces staring back at her. She saw her parents in the front row, their expressions a mixture of pride and concern. She saw her classmates whispering to each other, wondering what was happening. She closed her eyes, took the deepest breath of her life, and opened her mouth. The first note that emerged was so pure, so unexpected, that several people gasped audibly. It was Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, but Emma's version was something entirely different. Her voice carried 17 years of silence, 17 years of trapped emotions, 17 years of dreams that had been locked away. The auditorium was dead silent, except for Emma's voice floating through the air like something divine. Parents stopped whispering. Students stopped checking their phones. Even the ushers in the back stopped moving. As Emma reached the chorus, her voice soared to heights that seemed impossible for someone who had never sung publicly. Tears began flowing from eyes throughout the audience. Her mother Maria was sobbing openly. Her father David had his hand over his heart as if it might explode. But it was the bridge that broke everyone. Emma's voice cracked with raw emotion as she sang about broken hallelujahs and cold and broken hearts. Every person in that auditorium felt like she was singing directly to their soul, expressing feelings they couldn't even name. When the final note faded into silence, the auditorium remained frozen for what felt like eternity. Then, slowly, one person began clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with ferocity that shook the building. Emma stood there, microphone in hand, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding what her voice was meant for. Not for casual conversation or classroom answers. It was meant for this, for touching hearts, for healing souls, for proving that sometimes our greatest limitations become our most extraordinary gifts. The video of Emma's performance was posted online that night. Within 48 hours, it had 3 million views. Within a week, record labels were calling. Within a month, she was singing on national television. But Emma Rodriguez never forgot the lesson that night taught her. Sometimes the most beautiful voices belong to those who have been silent the longest. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest strengths. And sometimes, just sometimes, what the world calls impossible is simply waiting for the right moment to prove everyone wrong. Today, Emma is one of the most successful recording artists in America. She still can't speak normally, but her voice and song has moved millions of people around the world. She's proof that your limitations don't define your potential. Your response to those limitations does. The girl who couldn't speak became the voice that changed everything. And if Emma Rodriguez can find her voice after 17 years of silence, imagine what impossible thing you might accomplish if you just keep believing. Remember, your greatest weakness might just be your undiscovered superpower waiting to emerge.